Salvete omnes. Hope you guys are doing well. Here with Aeneid, Book 1, lines 23 through 33. And this is the last of the third. So there's three parts to the introduction. And this is setting out or laying out why Juno hates the Trojans. All right, so we'll go through this and we'll talk a little bit about a couple of devices and some grammar. But we're going to start here with metuens. And before we start there, Saturnia is the subject. And this is another name for Juno. Her dad was Saturn, which is the Roman equivalent of Kronos. So here we go. So it's she, or Saturnia, fearing. So Saturnia and Memoir is going to go with that, right? We've seen Memoir before, but you can even start with Saturnia if you'd like. But so she, fearing this, oh, yeah, so these lines are all screwed up, but so this should be 22. So she, sorry, fearing this and mindful uh, of the old or ancient battle or ancient war. Again, notice here too we have A, B, B, A. So again, this would be chiasmus. She, first and foremost, or actually, we're going to start with quod here first, because quod, which is going to go with belly, right? So if we want to talk about some case stuff, this is genitive because we translate it as of. And then this is a neuter noun, so this is going to be a relative pronoun, which we talked about a little bit. So, which, first and foremost, she had waged, right? So, which war she had waged, first and foremost, on behalf of her beloved Greeks, right? So, Argis is Argives. We're going to see a lot of different names for Greeks and Trojans, not only in this passage, but through the rest of the text. And she waged it at or to Troy, right? Still, the causes subject of her wrath. There's going to be lots of subjects here. And the cruel or savage griefs or pains so we have had not yet fallen. Kaido is to fall. Had not yet, or still, the causes of her anger. It's plural here, but we could always make it singular. And her cruel or savage griefs, or grievances, or pains, had not yet fallen from her mind. So ablative. See the O. Right? And now we have a couple of subjects going here with monet, the verb to remain. So here's the first subject. This is hyperlinked. So Eudicium Parides. The first subject, this should be orange. The Judgment of Paris, and that is right here portrayed. And you can also click to the hyperlink. And so we'll start with this part. So the Judgment of Paris. This is a participle. It's going to go with eudicium. Notice the agreement with the ums. So the Judgment of Paris, having been placed, because this is postum, deep in her mind, right? Or in her deep mind, but deep, if we make this an adverb, it makes better sense. Deep in her mind, stays. And the injury, another subject to Mamet, the injury of her slighted form, again, genitives, the injury to or of her slighted form, and the hated race. This is referring to the Trojans. Hated, right? And the honors having been taken of Ganymede. Ganymede was a handsome or very attractive Trojan who Zeus desired or Jupiter desired for himself and to be his cupbearer for eternity. So as you can tell, that would anger Juno if her husband asked Ganymede to be his perpetual wine bearer. So again, we're going to touch upon participles for sure as we go through, but there's some here I'll point out in a little bit. So this is still in a subject form. This is still referring to Saturnia or Juno. So she, Juno, having been inflamed by these things. Now we have to go all the way down here to find her headverb. She was keeping off the Trojans. Here's our object. Now this is a Greek accusative, right? Our objects, and Iactatus is going to go with that. Right, notice there would be agreement here. I know the endings don't look the same, but there's still agreement. So she was keeping off the Trojans, having been tossed about above um, on the entire surface. So this is the surface of the sea. So this is one of those things where it's mentioned as part of it as the whole. Um, so could be an example of synecdoche. It perhaps could be an example of metonymy, but metonymy is slightly different. So these are ablatives, right? The E and the O, right? They don't agree and they don't look the same here because they're a different declension. Ichor is third declension, and Toto is it would have to be second declension neuter, since that's what that is. Likewise, she was keeping off the remnants or the remains of the Danans, which again is another name for the Greeks, legendary founder of. Yeah, so the descendants of Danos or Danaten, who was the legendary ruler of, or one of the legendary rulers of a city-state in Greece. Remember, there were many, and the indomitable Achilles. Right. So remnants of this is referring back to the Trojans. Those are the ones who were left alive after the Trojan War, and she was keeping them far from Latium. Again, Latio is this is ablative here. Um, it's that region where Rome is eventually going to be founded. That's where we get the word Latin from for the language we take. Right, moving on. So they, the Trojans, having been driven. So acti is a subject, or it's a participle, but it's with the implied Trojans as subject. So the Trojans, having been driven by fate, or by the fates, were wandering. Yes, we have imperfect sheep say ba, so this is an imperfect verb. Were wandering through many years by, this can also be by, over. So these are accusatives, and they go with this preposition here. What do you notice about the word pattern? Usually it's per multos annos, but here the pattern has changed. This is something called an astrophe, and you see an astrophe down here too. Right, so and we go down to here, around all seas, or every sea. Accusatives, because they go with circum. So it was, these are genitives, it was of such difficulty to establish the Roman race. Roman nation, the Roman country, against can mean a lot of different things. Okay, so I want to highlight a couple of grammatical points, right? Other than the fact that we have lots of different names, like Saturnia's, a name for Juno. We have Troy here mentioned. So these are the proper nouns. Argis is a region. It's also it refers to the Greeks. Paris was a Trojan prince, son of King Priam and Queen Hecuba. He's the one who started the whole war. And here's Paris down here. Here are the three goddesses, right? That he has to choose. He's holding a golden apple. So that's what the judgment of Paris is referring to, because he gives the apple to Venus, and Venus gives him Helen. And there's a magical spell cast so that Helen will kind of leave willingly with him in some versions. And then we have here's Juno, and here is Minerva, right? So naturally, Juno is upset at Paris for not giving her the apple, and that's what she mentions here in her the injury to her slighted form. So these could either be genitives or datives, but and then the hated race, which refers to the Trojan race. Then Ganymede, again, Ganymede is a Trojan prince or Trojan male. He's very attractive and desired by Jupiter, Juno's husband. Then we have Danann, who's the legendary king rulers of Argos, which is a city-state in Greece. And then we have Achilles mentioned here. And not to mention Latio. Right, so lots of proper nouns as we go by. Right, but grammatically, I just want to hit upon this metuens right here. Metuens is a present participle. It means fearing, right? And it's in the subject form because it goes with Saturnia. As we move on below, there's a couple other things. Repostum. Remember we talked about this last time. This is a perfect passive participle. It means having been put back or having been placed. Here again, it's referring to the judgment of Paris having been lodged or remains deep in her mind. So we know she can't let these things go, and she's also incredibly, she's bogged down by it. I can't say here is another example of a perfect passive participle. It's going with an understood subject of Juno. So she, Juno, having been incensed by these things, right? And actually, incensed is a derivative we get from that, meaning to burn. Then we have yaktatos. We've seen yaktatos before, right? This is also a perfect passive participle going with Troias. So the Trojans having been tossed about above, right? And lastly, here we have akti, which is a perfect passive participle also. Since it's a participle, it's part verb, part adjective. The adjective part of it, it's modifying the Trojans, which aren't there. So the Trojans, having been driven by fate, were wandering. And again, if we take a look at the scansion of this line, which I'll ask you to do, we have elision here, and then we have lots of long marks, so lots of spondees. So it's going to highlight the kind of the sorry, it's going to highlight it's going to give the lines added effect. Sorry, that's ridiculous. All right. In any event, we'll be back. I'll be back in class next time to discuss this with you. Wale te omnes.